It's been 2 seasons now since the Kevin Durant trade saga really unfolded, with Toronto as one of the leading destinations to land the player. And Raptors fans, now that we're looking back on it, we really dodged a bullet. Let's get into it. Kevin Durant is undoubtedly a first ballot Hall of Famer and one of the greatest NBA players of all time. But looking back on the potential trade saga that unfolded between Kevin Durant and the Toronto Raptors in his time with the Brooklyn Nets, the Raptors really got this one right, and I'll explain why over the course of the video. Now, we're kind of piling on here with the Phoenix Suns in the wake of their extraordinarily disappointing season, where they never really put things in place in the regular season, and when it came to the playoffs, they were swept in the first round by the Minnesota Timberwolves. And what was a series where, believe it or not, the Phoenix Suns were actually favored to win that series going into it, and in the end, they do not get a single game. And though Kevin Durant's statistics over the course of the season, and even in those 4 games in the playoffs, were still very good, elite Kevin Durant level numbers, you could just sense the demeanor overall, once again, of a player who potentially didn't really want to be in his current situation. And those sort of thoughts about the player kind of crept into his postseason press conferences as well, talking to the media after the Suns' elimination. And looking back on everything, again, the Raptors made a really good decision in avoiding this trade potentially happening. But before we go any further in this video, I want to remind you guys that this is Amateur Hour Sports, the YouTube channel completely dedicated to giving you Toronto Raptors content. I'll do it in videos like this 3 times a week, but also I add in live streams on top of it. So subscribe to the channel, keep up to date with all that content, and drop a like on this video if you enjoy along the way. But to backtrack a little bit on Kevin Durant, as the saga was unfolding, it was very exciting for Raptors fans. It was very exciting for myself. I wanted a trade to go down. I wanted Kevin Durant on the Raptors. It really appeared as though a team that was involving players like Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes, and Kevin Durant, that team had a real opportunity to make a push in the Eastern Conference and make a push to win an NBA championship, with the East being pretty wide open at the time. I mean, the East, seemingly on a year-to-year basis, fluctuates from being wide open and not being very open at all. But it's never really a consistent stretch where there's no opening to contend in the Eastern Conference. So I wanted to make this trade happen, but the sticking point continued to be over the course of the trade saga that the Brooklyn Nets wanted Scottie Barnes in the deal, and if Scottie Barnes was not going to be included in the trade, nothing was going to happen involving Kevin Durant. And that was the big sticking point from the Brooklyn Nets perspective, but it was a huge talking point amongst the Raptors fan base and the Raptors community of people who said that Scottie Barnes, coming off of a rookie season, is that really worth investing in over getting Kevin Durant? It's Kevin freaking Durant, man. That was the discourse going on around this whole thing. But my stance was always, I really wanted Kevin Durant. I was not going to put Scottie Barnes in a deal to make it happen for a variety of reasons. Number one, you can start discussing the Kevin Durant contract situation, where he was on a very long-term contract, even at the time, a 4-year contract at the time, 2 years ago, making just under an average of $50 million per season. And this is not a young Kevin Durant. This is a Kevin Durant entering his late 30s, where injuries have started to creep in for the player. And alongside those injuries that have crept in for the player, we've also seen Kevin Durant on time and time again not wanting to be in his current situation. Quit on the Oklahoma City Thunder, left the Golden State Warriors after forming the greatest team of all time, quit on the Brooklyn Nets, and honestly, it looked like in quite a few games, a 4-game sweep of the Phoenix Suns by the Minnesota Timberwolves, it looked like he did not want to be in Phoenix in at least a couple of those games. So all of these difficulties around Kevin Durant made the reward of having his clearly outstanding basketball abilities even into his mid to late 30s, it was not worth it to lose a player of Scottie Barnes' caliber, even at the time. In hindsight, we very much have a better picture of what the situation would have looked like and how it may have unfolded. But even at the time, the prospect of having Scottie Barnes off of a Rookie of the Year season, that made so much sense for the Raptors to keep. And now we can look at it with a hindsight lens. I don't really like doing that. I like thinking about it in the moment, at the time. What was the right decision? And the right decision at the time very much seemed like it was keeping Scottie Barnes was the best thing for this franchise to build around going forward. Now the Raptors have hit a rebuild. Now that Scottie Barnes has been an all-star in his 3rd NBA season at 22 years old, the decision that the Raptors made very clearly was the correct one for this team to move with going forward. Kevin Durant, as much as it would have been great to have a player of his caliber on the team, potentially challenged with the likes of, Pascal Siakam on the team, it would have cost the Raptors sorely by losing Scottie Barnes in the trade, by trading away probably 3 first-round picks to make it happen, along with 2 pick swaps. It would have absolutely crippled the Raptors. And though they would have been challenging potentially for an NBA championship, would that team really have been in the position to win it all? Probably not. As the Suns are finding out, even with the investment of every draft pick you have and all of your assets really to build a team around superstar players, it's still incredibly difficult to go and win an NBA championship. And even though, I'm looking at this situation like the Phoenix Suns have made that investment, at least they're a playoff team on a year-to-year basis. What have the Raptors accomplished in the last 2 seasons where I can look back and say, well, clearly it was the right decision not to trade for that player, but what have the Raptors accomplished? They've missed the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. Understandably, that's an area you can look at and say, maybe you should have done the trade. But let's consider what the situation is going to look like going forward for both teams. For the next 5 seasons, the Phoenix Suns have no control over their draft picks. So bringing in new talent is going to be incredibly difficult. And even though the Raptors don't have control of their draft pick for one of the next few seasons, they have a plan in place, they have a core in place, and they have future draft picks in place to really build around what clearly has become now a foundational piece of any NBA franchise in Scottie Barnes. As for the Phoenix Suns, they're in a massive position of peril here. Completely in trouble here. The Bradley Beal situation is not going to go away. 3 years left at $50 million, a no-trade clause. I think it's 3 years. I mean, my goodness, if it is. Kevin Durant, 2 more years at around $50 million. How are they going to afford to put players around these guys? Perhaps if the Phoenix Suns has handled things differently and not made that Bradley Beal trade, things could have gone a little bit better for the team. But as it stands, looking back on this situation, it's not as much about the Kevin Durant side of things. It's clear that he still has tons of basketballing ability. There was the extra baggage that we were afraid of in terms of, just quitting on a team or the injuries that are piling up as the player ages, as could happen to any player except for LeBron James for some reason. This situation, this discussion is more so along the lines of Scottie Barnes and what he has accomplished. Amazing person to have as the lead figure in your organization, clearly, who brings this astonishing level of basketball for his age and an astonishing basketball IQ and sense at his age as well. It's clear this is the player the Raptors want to rebuild around, and ultimately, time will tell if this really was the best decision. But the early signs are showcasing that Scottie Barnes was a piece worth hanging on to, and all the question marks. You're really not going to trade for Kevin Durant because of Scottie Barnes? The answer at the time was and should have been yes, and it's even more of a resounding yes at this stage, even 2 years later. So as far as the Kevin Durant saga, it's not necessarily dodging a bullet of acquiring Kevin Durant. It's dodging the bullet of having traded Scottie Barnes, looking foolishly later on saying, wow, look how good he is, and we had him coming off of a Rookie of the Year season. That would have looked a whole lot worse for the Raptors in the summer of 2024. But what do you make of this whole saga? If you could go back to the Kevin Durant situation when the Raptors were linked with a trade for their player in his time with the Brooklyn Nets, if you could go back today, would you make that trade, sending Scottie Barnes over to the Nets and bringing back Kevin Durant? You let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. But that's it for me for today. Drop a like if you did enjoy. Subscribe to the channel as well for more Raptors content. I'll see you again next time for another video.